This manga made me want to puke out yesterday's breakfast, lunch, and dinner combined. No, seriously. Today, I'm going to be talking about a specific chapter from one of the scariest, most unnerving, and twisted manga series of all time, and how it gave me a phobia of snails. That is, of course, Uzumaki, written and drawn by horror master Junji Ito. Uzumaki began serializing from 1998 to 1999, finishing with 19 chapters, with an additional last story being added by Junji Ito the next year. For those of you who haven't read the manga or haven't read it in a while, the story goes as follows. Kirie Goshima and her boyfriend, Shuichi Saito, witnessed the effects of an ancient curse that involved spirals, slowly enveloping the town and citizens. Shuichi's parents, classmates, as well as other townsfolk have started being affected by the spiral, twisting them into a former shell of themselves. And speaking of shells, the chapter I really wanted to talk about in this video is chapter 8, The Snail. By this point in the series, Kirie and Shuichi have already seen some pretty nasty stuff. I won't explain all of them because one short sentence won't give them justice. But it had effects like Shuichi's parents becoming obsessed and maddened by the spiral curse, and the two lovers who twisted their body into a snake and set off in the sunset. This chapter is just another effect of how the spiral can curse you into becoming a former shell of yourselves. And yes, the pun is included. The chapter begins with Rain and Kirie and her friend talking about a boy named Katayama who only seems to show up whenever it rains. Katayama shows up and gets scolded by the teacher for coming to school late. A classmate, Sumura, laughs at him for being slow. You can see he always seems to be wet from the rain. Every close-up of him depicts him as being sweaty or wet or moist, which shows how seemingly slimy he is. Almost like... In gym class, they play volleyball and Katayama misses the ball. Out of anger in the locker room, Sumura and his friends bully him for being slow. Even being slow in changing clothes, which then they strip him and drag him out into the hallway for people to see. Katayama slumps on his belly, which revealed to everyone that ominous spiral shape on his back. As a foreshadowing for what eventually happens to him, he crawls his way back into the locker room and leaves behind this trail of liquid behind him. The next day, Katayama's back shows to have swollen with a spiral shape. Kirie's friend comments on how he looks like a snail. The day after that, the back has swollen even more. Then the day after that, Katayama crawls his way to the chair without any clothes. Then, the next day, Friday, Katayama was seen crawling on the side of the school, and one of the pages that activate my gag reflex shows Katayama's eyes bulging out of their sockets and standing up like a snail. The teachers and principals decide to call his parents and take him home, but even the parents don't want him and don't believe that that's their son. The school decided to capture him and put him inside a cage like a school pet. Sumura continues to bully him and poke him with a stick through the cage. After that, the rain stopped, and Sumura is shown to be suffering the effects of the curse. He has been drinking water non-stop and shows exhaustion keeping up with everyone. Eventually, Sumura stops showing up to school. Kirie and her friend visit Katayama, who, after it rained, stayed in the shell. They decide to hose his shell with water to hydrate him. He comes out of the shell, which freaks Kirie and her friend out, and they both run away, leaving the water on. The next time it rains, the teacher says that Sumura hasn't been showing up to school and asks if anyone know where he is. A big snail then slowly rises up from the window, which causes everyone to freak out. The teacher asks if Katayama escaped his cage, which the student denies and says that the snail is Sumura. They capture him and put him inside the cage with Katayama. Kirie's friend tells the irony of the situation, of how Tsumura would bully Katayama as a human, but now that they're both snails, the both of them get along. A classmate shrieks out that snails are hermaphrodites, which means they both have male and female reproductive organs. Yeah, they're getting along well because they're mating. Several weeks later, they dug under the cage and escaped, leaving a trail of slime that leads to the hills. The teacher, Kirie, and her friend continue to follow the trail. It guides them to eggs buried in the ground. The teacher destroys the eggs, calling it unnatural. A few days later, it was raining, and this time, It was the teacher who came to class late. What I really love about Junji Ito is his art style. There's just something so unnerving about everything in his style. Maybe it's the grotesque details and the love he puts in, but there's something about it that puts me on edge, even when something not inherently scary is happening. The body horror of having your whole body turn to a snail is just so. Ugh. And when Tsumura turned into a snail and you can still see his hair, every strand of my hair and my body stood up due to how disgusted I felt. The human snail's design is so fantastic at making me want to puke. Cause tell me why these snails have lips. Their size difference compared to humans is also a big no-no. Snails are usually small, so when I see one the size of a human, that just feels so wrong. Imagine sleeping at the dead of night and this thing comes in and slowly eats you. Another thing that I liked about it was the theme. The theme is bullying. Karayama gets bullied. He turned to slow snail. It's how the effects of bullying can turn you into a husk of yourself. But Junji Ito turns that message into something so surreal and vomit-inducing. It completely went over my head on my first read through. The pacing of the chapter overall was sublime to say the least. The slow build-up towards Katayama's and Tsumura's transformation and the sudden reveal of the teacher suddenly becoming a snail was so excellently done. Now let's get to the bits I didn't like. When I say I didn't like, they're just small parts of the setting that really don't matter. It doesn't take from the overall experience as a whole. Besides, it's not really a big deal to me. More so like an annoyance at characters. Like, seriously, if this manga was a 10, it would be like a 9.5. If there is something for me to nitpick about, it would be the characters, like Tsumura and the teacher, who appear to have no common sense or empathy towards this guy who literally just turned into a snail. Bro is a fiend. And the teacher called the eggs unnatural and destroyed them. There's something about how the characters act that make you not like them, but you still feel that deep sense of fear for them, even though they don't show it themselves. When Tsumura was gonna turn into a snail, I knew what was coming, but I still wasn't ready for it. Actually, every character just seems to act so inhuman and dumb sometimes. Why would they keep this human who turned into a snail as a class pet rather than contacting the government and biologists to see how this kid turned into a snail? What's worse is that two other people turned into snails after this, which then gives the possibility of the phenomenon being a spreading virus or disease that's contagious. There's just something about the characters in Junji Ito's stories that you have to suspend belief in. Like I said, I really don't care about these problems much, since they don't take away from the story, and maybe they have a reasonable explanation. The audience can make an assumption like maybe the townsfolk is acting like this because of the spiral curse, twisting their norms. What's normal to them is abnormal to us, and vice versa. So what stood out and what gave me the phobia? I swear seeing this kid's eyes pop out like that and the slow crawling up of Tsumura on the window will forever be ingrained in my nightmares whenever I try to sleep. And the teacher crawling his way into the classroom after crushing the eggs was one of the main reasons why I have a fear of snails in the first place. I remember, after this chapter, I had a strong disgust towards snails and slugs and the like. Me and my brother used to have fish tanks with guppies. It got infested with snails and I couldn't clean them because of my phobia. That was a fun memory. Every picture of a snail or slug just gives me a flash of disgust. Every single time, it makes my stomach feel like it's gonna throw up last night's dinner. There are two more that stood out to me. The first being the snail's mating, and the second, the teacher turning into a snail. Let's talk about the former first. The snail's mating. That was genuinely a what the frick moment. I know for a fact Tsumura would not want this when he was a human. So seeing him reduced to this and mating with Katayama because of his natural instinct is so skin-crawlingly maddening. Fun fact, this is where I learned that snails were hermaphrodites. Moreover, the teacher turning into a snail. I can say with full confidence this was the biggest reason why I have/had the biggest fear of touching snails. I always thought that the reason the teacher turned into a snail was because he crushed those snail eggs with his feet and made contact with them, which then spread the snail disease into him or whatever. In fear of becoming a snail, I do not touch them with a 6 feet pole. In conclusion, Junji Ito snails are scary. I haven't even mentioned the girl whose tongue turns into a slug. We can save that for another video though. Is this worth reading? Yes, absolutely. This story is only one of a 19 chapter story. The main story, Uzumaki, is one of the finest horrors I have ever laid eyes on. It's probably the reason why I love horror so much. If you are a horror fan looking for something unique and you've never heard of Junji Ito's work, then I implore you to taste one of his finest dishes, Uzumaki. It's unlike anything I've ever seen from other horror franchises. For me, this manga is a 9.5 out of 10. If you have something in mind for me to review, leave them in the comments below. That's about it. Like and subscribe.